action. BCAG final 23-24 overall work program budget, and John.
Members of the board, item 7 is the approval of our 23-24 BCAG overall work program and budget. Back at our March meeting, I reviewed a draft of the overall work program with board members, and since that time, we've not made really any changes to the document. I did address the comments that we get provided from Caltrans, Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration, so their comments have been made into the document, and they weren't very significant. Staff's also finalized our expenditures and revenues for the coming fiscal year. Overall, we have 25 specific work elements that address our state and federal transportation responsibilities, in addition to other planning studies that we have underway and other capital projects. Proposed budget for next year is $6.3 million. I indicated last month as well, staffing-wise, I'll be retiring at the end of the calendar year. Andy will be assuming the director position. And then we are looking at adding a IT manager sometime probably around the first of the year, just to deal with all the complexities of our IT programs that we have here at the facility. With that, I'm happy to address any comments regarding the
quick comment I'll make. All the time. Okay.
I think.
We had the State of the City Tuesday night in Orville. It was well attended by over 400 in theater. We mentioned the fact that one of our priorities was to improve roads. We got a standing ovation. I mean, I wanted to share that with you folks as you work on a road. It was awesome. It was just, everybody wants to see roads, and anything attached to that is being a big deal. I want to share that with you because I was even shocked by the response. Big deal. It's huge.
It's a priority.
Yes, it is.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I had a question. I'm not sure if this has to do with the budget, but it sort of does. I know that BCAG's HR work, a lot of the HR work, payroll, who had been done by Butte County up until this point.
Correct.
Okay. And then you guys have now, or we have now moved over to a different provider since, is that correct?
So yeah, the county HR department reached out to us earlier this year indicating that they wanted to get away. It was just, I think, a staffing and cost issue to try to provide us right now just payroll services. So we've been looking at other entities, and I believe we're going to go with Paylocity. So we're transitioning to make that happen starting July 1. County HR is working with us on that, helping us a great deal. But that should be a pretty close transition. We'll continue to have the auditor's office as our kind of treasurer. That's kind of required under the transportation development.
Great. Well, I know that I appreciate the willingness for you guys to move away from the county. I know they've got a new software called Workday, and it's been a challenge. And the same thing is happening at LAFCO. LAFCO's reached out to you guys to kind of help take that. I think it's pretty economical, Paylocity, from what I understand.
Yeah. It is. And I said, I think they'll be able to provide all the services that the county had been providing, and not really at a much.
Thank you.
We will still maintain the workday, just not the payroll portion.
Do we have any public comment? No.
Move to approve the budget.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 8, Regional Transit Final 2023-24 Service Plan Budget. Sarah.
Last month, the board reviewed the draft fiscal year 2023 budget, and today we're presenting the final. So There are pretty minimal changes from the draft that the board received. And in summary, the final budget identifies a total operating budget of 11.8 million for both the B-line fixed route and paratransit. This is about an increase of 3.5% from the prior year. And notable increases are mainly due to transit services contract hourly rate. We're also proposing to presence outreach events. Regarding fares, there's a 23% increase from the prior year from increased ridership. And there's also a 27% increase in federal other funding, which covers 45% of costs in the budget. The remainder is covered through PDA, which is actually seeing a 15% decrease prior year. This is mainly federal funding and revenue estimates. On the capital side, we're looking at ordering 4 electric buses and also 6 smaller diesel buses.
Cost of an electric bus.
Right now, we're looking pretty close to $1 million to be on the conservative side, and also we need to purchase $1 million plus.
Do we know what it costs a year to charge a bus?
That's a question. I don't think we have the exact estimate right now. We did do an analysis with the BCAG, and they showed that with our existing charging, we can charge 5 buses. So we don't have to have additional power right now from PG&E, but as we continue to convert to electric, that is something. It depends with the manufacturer that we go with. So they're saying around 200 miles, but it really depends on environmental. So it gets hot here over the summer, and are on board. So we aren't anticipating 200. It would probably be.
Hopefully.
With our electric buses we have now, do we have an expectation of service life?
Currently don't have any, but they're saying that it's about 12 years, similar to the fixed route.
Is it the goal to transition all of our buses to electric? That's
Yeah, the current requirements are that all transit agencies in California have to have electric buses by 2040. Milestone dates as to how to purchase buses. This one's in 2025, like 25%. We're already process of was it 5 buses? 6 buses now. Sometime after I'm retired, around the first of the year, or sometime so.
This is a weird question, but how many buses do we have? How many buses does BCAG run?
We currently have 29 fixed route buses.
Wow.
So that's what we would be converting to zero emission. And just on the zero emission note, for hydrogen. Electric, right? But maybe over time, available in these counties, has longer range.
I will be bringing updates to you as this happens.
Then our paratransit are not included in the 6 states, so are they also not included in our 25%?
They are actually required to also convert to have less paratransit vans, and the technology for paratransit now not there currently. It is in our zero emission rollout plan to convert the entire fleet.
I want to give the board just a quick kind of how I'm looking at this, because I'm kind of at the head of this thing. At 2026, 25% of all the buses we
buy have to be zero emissions. We can still buy internal combustion. By 2020, first quarter of 2029, 100% of the buses are zero emissions. So what I'm trying to do is figure out the best way to bring the zero emissions technology in as controlled and carefully and sustainably as possible without it being a real problem for us, but also keep our internal combustion diesel and gas going as long as we can into the transition, because that's our most reliable source of transportation now. So it's kind of this, it's a little bit of this balance of going, you know, with the regulations on top of you and also taking our fleet far enough along that we can convert over to the zero emissions without being in a position like a lot of agencies are, where they go out and they buy these zero emission buses, most of them electric, and they're sitting in the yard because they either don't know how to fix them or they can't charge them. And charging them is really, you ask a good question, how much does it cost to charge? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So you asked a good question about the charging of the buses. It's expensive. Charging a bus, it's a big battery, and the chargers themselves will pull a lot of electricity. Right now, we have enough spare, we think we have enough spare service here to charge 5 full-size buses overnight. We could probably do more than that, but it'll be a little bit of a shuffle on being able to charge them overnight, put them into service. Maybe we have more above 5 that we have to continue charging. So it's going to be this real slow, careful transition to getting to the zero emissions, but having it be useful and not be in a situation where, oh, we don't have enough buses, we can't deliver service because something's broken down. So I'll be bringing this to you pretty frequently throughout the year as we get our electricity in, as a bus shows up. We'll see those and just try to keep you guys abreast as much as possible as to how successful we are. So
Through air quality for,
we've been approached by air quality. The numbers and funding available isn't very much. It's not enough. Yeah. Chargers are a couple hundred, $200,000 to $300,000 a piece. Buses are $1 million a piece. We really have to rely on the state and federal funding sources to buy those things. So I'm kind of not real. I kind of don't want to take up all these air quality funds if other people can use them dollar amounts for things.
Do we have any routes that we currently run with electric?
We have no electric buses right now at all. The routes that we likely would run would be routes that are pretty frequent and relatively close to us, the property right here, so that a 200-mile range bus is not going to go 200 miles. It's going to go 150. It depends on how many people are on it, how hot or cold is it. The parasitic loads on the bus, a big vehicle, as you move it around, really determine how far they can go and how good your batteries are. How good are your batteries to hold that charge and disperse it through the traction motors, which what drive them. So
Batteries do degrade over a period of time.
they do. So you can get a warranty, extended warranty on them, which we will do. You can get 6 and 12-year warranties. Because they're a 12-year bus, we'll try to get the longest warranty possible. It's not a full replacement. It's a give us your old bad battery and we'll give you a really great discount on a new one. That's kind of how that works.
So, how do you foresee, say, going up to Paradise?
Not going to send electric buses up to Paradise, maybe hydrogen. Hydrogen fuel cells work much like a compressed natural gas. They have that amount of ability and torque to actually get up that grade. There also is on the horizon out there, there's internal combustion hydrogen, which is not real far along, but it's making its way into the ag industry. So the fact that they're putting that type of technology into a large vehicle in the ag industry I think we'll probably see some internal combustion down the road, but for the most part, hydrogen is gonna be a fuel cell. It's basically an electric bus, but the battery itself is not this huge battery like is on the electric buses. It's a rechargeable battery that works, as you process the hydrogen. So in my opinion, it's better. And with our Yosemite Clean Energy Project, which, the county, I think, and even Paradise, and maybe everyone knows about over in the Orville area, they are on track to go 100% green hydrogen, which was only 50-50. They were gonna do 50% green hydrogen and 50% to lesser quality that you can't, it's not a fuel grade quality. Because the federal government's getting behind it and offering a lot of credits per kilogram of hydrogen produced, they've changed their model to 100%, and they are expecting to be on board producing hydrogen by selling it, moving it, putting it in vehicles by the end of 25. So I've been in pretty close contact with them and said, you know, if we had buses for you to fuel by the end of 2026 or 27, you know, you guys will be available, right? They're kind of relying on us to be a producer or a consumer for them. I think they seem like they're a good outfit and like they really have their act together. So electric buses are coming, but I think I'm gonna put our sights on hydrogen if we can. I feel better about the hydrogen, but.
So if we have 29 buses, you would almost have to have 29 charging stations. I mean, wouldn't you have to charge them every?
Depends on the size of the charger. So right now, we can bring a charging, if you go to the banks or Target, you see kind of behind the fence are these charging cabinets, they call them, and then the cabinets feed the dispensers that vehicles are actually pulled up to. The cabinet is the actual charger. So the size or ability or power, I guess, consumption or delivery of that charger will depend on how many vehicles you can charge and how big the battery is of the vehicle that you're charging. So in our case, we'll start out with a charging cabinet, single charging cabinet with 4 of them, through 4, that will serve, each cabinet will serve a dispenser of which 2 buses could hook up to. So our initial phase is that we're setting up to go with 8 buses in a pretty safe overnight charge that we could actually pull that off. So the technology's changing, the chargers are getting better, the batteries are getting better. So, you know, what we see now is maybe only being able to do 8 buses with what we have. If we get to the point where we can do 10 or 12, because things are changing. So it's a lot of electricity, it's a lot of power. Yeah.
I have one question. In your purchase agreement, because I've heard some of the other school districts fail to get a training requirement. Sure, our mechanic staff are gonna have training because they're all so different.
That's a big part of it too. So, the beginning of July 2025 will be our new 2-year extension with TransDev. Part of the agreement, is going to identify training for new technologies, what's called new technologies, zero emissions. They've already identified several $1,000s to get their mechanics, on board with the electric training. And then when we do the purchase agreements with the buses, that's an element within what we buy from them is we buy a certain amount of training. So we're really gonna try to invest, you know, what we can afford as much as we can into the training of operating them, and working on them.
Your strategy too, the idea of hybrid is probably more realistic than one or the other, because hybrid at least gives you some reliability.
Right.
That discussion is really a nice way to go.
I think we just need to be careful. There's just so many agencies out there that they get lured by all of the money and they go out and they buy vehicles and then they get them on site and there are people out there that are going out and buying mobile chargers on wheels. you know, that you would charge your car with, and thinking that that's gonna do it, so.
Just one quick comment, you know, a lot of times we as cities and counties, we don't pat ourselves on the back enough. I mean, we do a lot of great things. We are the government, but we do a lot of great things, and I think we need to really make a big splash with this when the time comes, whether it's 8 or 10 months down the road from now. Some big press release, some big deal to show that we are moving in the, direction of electricity, or more fuel, not fuel efficient, but, you know, less, emissions.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we can really put our hat on and be proud of, and even though it's required, but moving in that direction. So just something to think about
Yeah.
8, 10 months down the road.
For sure. Thank you.
Oh, and one other thing, Andy, I don't know if this is
Yeah.
Sarah, are the used buses worth anything? You sell them for anything?
Yeah. They're retired, we list them up for auction, and things just get,
Maybe 5,000, 10,000, something like that, or?
it really just depends.
Okay.
It's a little discouraging sometimes.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, I'm thinking of a bus, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any public comment on this item? Any public comment? I'll entertain a motion.
For approval, acceptance of the.
Second, I think Rose seconded, yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, information items are there for you. Do we have any business from the floor? All right, we will adjourn then to our next meeting on May 25th.
You want to go, I think they want to go over the
Item 9.
information.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, you are.
That's okay.
I thought it was.
Sarah thought she was done.
Trying to get us on.
We gotta wait till 10.
Yeah.
Sorry.
okay.
Sarah. Study, Repton.
Well, since the last comprehensive review of line was done in 2010, there's events that have wildfires, COVID, zero-emission vehicles. So we've identified the need to look more comprehensively at our system, identify how service can be delivered. So in September of 2021, we entered into an agreement with LSC Transportation Lake Tahoe for this routing study. And the routing study looks at recommendations to improve ridership, identify alternative routing options, develop other solutions to meet the needs of our current and future riders. To date, the study has completed the following tasks. We've done an existing conditions analysis, done multiple public outreach events, and we've surveyed our riders on board. And today we're presenting the draft plan, which summarizes the work to date and outlines recommended changes. And we're going to be sharing an overview of the project and the draft plan, as well as outreach opportunities to stay engaged and provide feedback on the service changes. And I want to hand it over to Gordon Shaw, who you see on your screen, LSC Transportation.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning and present our draft recommendations to you. I know that everyone is busy these days, and I will run through this pretty quickly. There's lots and lots of background information on existing conditions and what we've been doing, but what I'd like to do is to share a screen here and get pretty quickly into what our recommendations are. So you should be looking at a really pretty picture of buses in a sunset right now. Let me know if you're not, but we will dive in here. I'm going to go a little bit on existing conditions and get to the plan. So in our service evaluation of what's working well and what's could be doing better, we looked at the community, because a transit system really needs to fit the needs of the community that it serves, the county that it serves in this case. We do have a high proportion of residents in Butte County that are in need of transit services for a variety of reasons. We see a lot of ridership generated by both Chico State and Butte College. In looking at the trends, it's a bit sobering that if you look at that chart in the corner, that ridership was dropping even before the pandemic hit, and then we took a real hit at that point. The better news more lately is that it's up by about 35 and actually a little bit more than that now. And we can expect ridership to rebound. People are not afraid of riding buses. They just have they may have less need to ride buses. But overall, we really see that transit has important functions in Butte County and Chico and Paradise and so on, getting people around and solving some of the parking problems and traffic problems. In terms of looking at specific areas, there are some areas of Chico that generate low ridership. The Route 7 kind of east side of town in particular was an area that, that's not a very effective route. Route 16 out to the northwest, same sort of thing. But we do have corridors of very high ridership and good service. We also have some neighborhoods that are far from a bus route, and so we're always looking at ways of getting service to areas that are not served. And then one of the things we found is the potential to kind of develop more of a hub at the North Valley Plaza for people that are just traveling on the north side of town. When we go down to Oroville, the core area of Oroville has got a higher ridership compared with the outlying areas. On-time dependability of the routes is a challenge in Oroville. Basically, what we have there now is 2 buses, each doing 2 routes. They go way out to the casino, they go way west, they go way north. And so we're not on time as much as we'd like. We have found that we could be running smaller vehicles and save a bit on fuel as we do that in the Oroville area. Going up on the ridge, we've got low productivity. Ridership per hour is our measure of productivity in the Paradise and Magalia area. And one of the key things there is the fixed route, and there are 2 fixed routes. There's 40 that only goes to Paradise and 41 that goes all the way up. But it misses a lot of the community. It's pretty spread out and not a whole lot of people that are close to a route, so it's difficult to serve. A little bit on public outreach. We've done a lot of rider surveys. 280 people filled out our surveys. We've had 2 virtual workshops in July and October of last year. We will be doing another one in May coming up. What we've heard is about 1/3 of the passengers are students. About 1/3 are going to work. And I kind of underline that because that says that Beeline is helping the economy to function, getting people to work, having employers can get employees. The transit riders like the system. They're excellent, 87%. So that's a positive sign. They really like the drivers and they really like the affordability. They'd love to have better bus stops and better information, and they'd love to have more frequent weekend service. So with that, I'm diving into the plan, and we've developed this in 2 layers. There's a near-term plan with the concept that this is what we were looking for over the next, say, 5 years at the most. Sarah can talk a little bit more about the rollout of these elements, but we've got a near-term plan, and then we'll be talking a little bit about more of a midterm plan. And look, kind of going around the system here, our draft plan in Chico looks like this, replacing Route 7 on the east side and 16 to the northwest up Esplanade, and then 52 out to the airport with what's called microtransit service. And I'm going to dive for a moment into what is microtransit. This is a very popular coming trend, growing trend in public transit service. And it really, you can think of it as mass transit form of Uber or Lyft, where you've got an app on your phone and you pick up your phone and say, I'd like a ride, and you tap into it. And within about 3 taps, the software and the computerized system is telling a van, you've got a ride at 123 Main Street, go pick them up, take them where they want to go. And you can call in if you like. And what we find in other areas is it's probably 75–80% of people will use the app, and even seniors can use the app. But you can call in. And what this specifically is to look is service in a zone, and it's intended to provide trips within a zone. And then if for longer trips, it'll get you to a transit hub. It is not as convenient as Uber typically is. We strive for, when you hit the app, when you make a call, we'll pick you up within 30 minutes. So it's not instantaneous. And then in this case, we're proposing that the fare is the same as the fixed route fare. This has become popular enough that the Sacramento RT service has got 7 of these zones. And over in Reno, they've got 3 zones, and they're looking at more. The Napa Vine transit system has got microtransit. So it's really something that is kind of coming in to serve these lower density areas that it's hard to serve, particularly if you've got a subdivision with a lot of streets that wander off. And you can kind of expand the service area by being more flexible. So you can see 2 different zones here. And the good news is that we can reduce the fixed route service and then put those resources into the microtransit and get a bit more out of it that way. Some other elements here, the DMV right in through here, we've looked at the on-time performance, and we're shifting some of the routes around a little bit to make some of the trips faster and more dependable. So that's what's happening with the DMV, and shifting it to Route 2. Route 5 down here in this Springfield Drive area, it only goes one direction right now, past some of these commercial properties. So we're switching that a bit. Fair Street down here, Route 17 will be shifted over to serve Fair Street and the Jesus Center there, and serve better needs on that. This looks like there's a route there already, but Route 32 is only a few runs a day going out to Durham. Revising Route 9 to serve the Amtrak station and over to Orange Street down south of campus. And then on 8 and 9, which really focus on the campus, adding service on Friday evenings and Saturday when classes are in session. So the overall structure is not a huge change, but we've got these changes to microtransit in some of the routes. We think that overall we're reducing travel times and improving on-time performance. We are better matching the type of service with the market that it's serving. We're expanding transit coverage and expanding service on Fair Street. Going down south to Oroville, the idea here is to take those 2 buses and turn one of those buses into a microtransit van service that actually can serve 2 areas. We've gone through the math on that. Kind of the north side of town, the county center area, and then the southeast side of town would be microtransit zones. We've got a 3rd microtransit zone over in the Thermalito area that can be served with an existing dial-a-ride vehicle. And then we've got the remaining bus that would do 3 short routes, kind of focusing that service. So it would still be providing the same paratransit zone. That's what's shown way out here is the paratransit. And we'd have microtransit out as far as the casino. But we think that this will, eliminate low productivity and expand our service area and get the bus more on time. Going up the ridge, this is probably the biggest kind of overall change. As I mentioned, there's 2 routes there, a short route and a long route. And it turns out that the Magalia route, Route 41, is actually doing better in terms of productivity. So looking at that, what we're proposing to do is to take those 2 routes and combine them into 1 route. and then take some of those vehicle hours and put microtransit up on the ridge. What you can see there with the yellow squares, that is the current list of development that's happening as the area recovers from Camp Fire. And it's a kind of a sobering thing to see how spread out they are. Basically in a pattern that we couldn't serve very well with fixed route. So this is where I think microtransit really has an opportunity here, that anywhere in that blue area, you can hit an app and we'll come pick you up within 30 minutes. We'll take you to the store within this area, or we'll take you to the transit center, and we'll put you on the big bus to take you down the hill. But that this is really going to, I think, be a part of Paradise, in particular in Magalia, rebounding from the fire and kind of supporting that redevelopment. And I think I've kind of run through all this sort of thing. Kind of a nuance here is that because we're providing local service, they would end up with the local fare of $1.75 rather than the regional fare of $2.40. Intercity routes, the other routes, not too much of a change that we see here. We're doing some streamlining on Route 20 to go through kind of the north side of Oroville. We've looked at the other routes and basically said, let's keep 30 where it is and 32 where it is. 32 ridership is not very high, but it's serving low-income areas, and it's an important need to get those people into town. And then there was a Route 31, which has been suspended since the Camp Fire, that was Oroville up to Paradise. And looking at the productivity of that, those dollars are better spent doing things like the microtransit service rather than putting that back in. And then paratransit service, no change in the service area one way or the other. So that is our proposed near-term plan. Looking a little further out, maybe 5 to 15 years out, 5 to 10 years out. This is maybe a bit aspirational, given that ridership is going to stay lower than it was, we expect, at least in the short term. But particularly if we're trying to do things like reduce air emissions and get a real shift to transit ridership, getting to 15-minute service on the two routes there that kind of tie our key corridors together, 3 and 14. 15 minutes is really getting to the point where you can start to throw the schedule away and just say, I'm just going to go out to the stop and it'll be by soon. And it's a higher level of convenience. We are also talking about transit signal priority on key intersections. Doesn't mean that the bus always gets a green indication, but it does things like it'll extend the green so that if the signal knows a bus is coming, it'll let it slide through and you'll get a quicker ride if you get on the bus. The capital plan, we've already talked a bit today about buses and buying buses. One of the things that this does with microtransit is it removes quite a lot of the existing stops in the microtransit zones. We do need, so there's some kind of long-term maintenance benefits on that. We do need to install 6 new stops on some of the new little bits of routes. They reduce the need for the big buses by 2 overall. We do need 6 vans for microtransit, but the way that the world has worked lately, the paratransit service demand is down to the point where we've got enough of a fleet existing to provide that using the paratransit vans. Maybe in the long run, we might look at a smaller van, but those we don't need to buy those right out the gate. There is a software cost associated with the microtransit service. I talked about transit signal priority. That is a pretty good chunk of money. That would be an excellent grant funding sort of thing. And then a final thing to mention is we've looked at the fare system and have some recommendations about simplifying it. And particularly, I believe there's 26 different forms of fares that the drivers and the accountants and everybody else has to keep track of. It's quite complicated. There's something called a 2-ride fares. There's like 6 different versions of that between regional and local and reduced and so on. So eliminating that and focusing more on the day pass. Right now, we've got a full fare day pass. It would be good to have a half fare day pass, but that ends up simplifying the overall system and making people's lives a lot easier. We really looked in detail about how many people are using these two ride fares. It's only, literally a few people per day. One of the other things that we're recommending is the discount fares, the half fares, to add to that list of disabled and seniors, veterans, people who put in their service to our country, and that's something that a lot of transit systems are doing now in recognition of that. And then, as I mentioned, providing microtransit is the same fare as the fixed route, so that we don't have kind of equity issues in those areas. So overall, we've done a lot of math and identified that basically this is on a budget basis, it's a hold the line. Less than 1% increase in overall vehicle hours, which is basically about the same sort of thing in terms of cost. You're still paying the microtransit drivers the same as you would a fixed route driver, so you don't save a whole lot of money there. You can save some fuel, but in overall, basically a hold the line on the budget. A little bit in the Paradise Magalia area, a little bit of an increase, just the way the math works out, and not much of a change in the other areas. But we do see that because of these benefits, we can forecast a 9% overall increase in ridership, 10% in Chico, a higher percent in Paradise Magalia, expanding that service area, a bit in Oroville, and a bit in the other intercity routes. And if we're increasing ridership and we're not increasing hours, we're increasing the overall productivity of the Beeline system. So with that, our next steps, and Sarah might want to add on to this, but we will be doing public outreach in May, a virtual public meeting that we're preparing for, meeting with stakeholders. We'll be doing some pop-up events at various events and up in different communities. We've got all our materials on the website, and this is a good time to hand it back over to Sarah.
Of implementation of some of these recommendations. Our goal to wrap up this study by the summer and the next fiscal year, looking closely at implementation, likely look at kind of a phase. And we're likely seeing that implementation following fiscal year. Gordon and I are happy to take any questions you might have.
What is the difference between microtransit and dial-a-ride?
So microtransit it can be for anyone that chooses to ride. The dial-a-ride service, that don't qualify for fixed route service. We still have our dial-a-ride as it is today, and microtransit would be replacing the fixed route service.
The other thing I would add to that is that paratransit typically requires an advanced reservation rather than same day. And microtransit can be, I want to go to the store in a half an hour, come pick me up.
Gordon was kind of saying there's some areas of Chico, Oroville, Paradise where, you have a fixed route running out there, and it's hard for people to get, not a lot of ridership. So as opposed to running that route every hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever, more on demand. So it's more like an Uber service. So they would have an app, they'd say, I need a ride, put it into the app, and then that bus will. Just a different way of serving an area, more cost effective.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll mention, like, as an example, Route 7, which serves kind of a not transit dependent part of Chico. It's only carrying now about 4 or 5 passengers for every hour that bus is out there. And we can do that with a microtransit van, that same level of productivity, and maybe we can do even a bit more. So.
Gordon said too, so you eliminate a big 40-foot bus maybe there. We have enough of our cutaway smaller buses that could, we can start with those for the microtransit. what you see in a lot of areas is they also have these kind of more type of vans that are maybe more appealing to people that don't currently want to get on a bus. So those are, you know, if the microtransit works and it's up, you could shift over to a different type of sprinter type van set up to serve those areas.
It's one of the things I'm looking at, so for residents of Paradise, say if somebody has a doctor's appointment down, if we're cutting down to one stationary route, and then you have a situation where a resident would have to call, and maybe the bus will be there in 30 minutes, maybe that makes it pretty difficult.
This is very common in other areas. Yes, you should build in a bit of time. You know, I would hit the app 45 minutes before I know the bus is leaving from the transit center, to give it a little bit of extra time. But on the other hand, it's coming to your door rather than you having to walk to a fixed route. And overall, we see it work well. You do have to navigate your trip, and you know the staff at Beeline can help you to organize that trip. But that's exactly what microtransit is doing in these other areas, is providing that first mile, last mile, to get to the fixed route, to get to down the hill in this case.
So with the microtransit then, and I'm just looking at Paradise residents, I mean, they've kind of been through enough and, you know, they're trying to figure out life still. So if would these microtransits just work within the town of Paradise, or would they also take people down to Chico?
And take those people within that zone to get on that fixed route, to get them down to Chico.
Right.
So,
And not to make it more confusing, we're focused on the routing study, but, you know, we've also talked about this non-emergency medical, which is a separate type thing we do that might come back to the board for implementation. That would probably, right now, there is no PA or paratransit service between Paradise and, if the board with this non-emergency medical, you would get on that type of reservation. That separate from this, but the microtransit really just tries to serve areas to get those people onto if they're traveling.
so they would, the microtransit would pretty much stay in the town of Paradise, and then you would have the one route that goes down to Chico.
Correct.
And then how often does would that route now be going from Paradise to Chico?
That
The same as, go ahead, Gordon.
it is a reduction from today. There's 8 or 9 runs a day. It goes down to 5 because we need the hours to put into the microtransit service, unless we want to really increase the dollars that we spend up there. We did look at how effective those existing runs are by time of day, and you know, there's a mid-morning and a mid-afternoon run that is quite low. I think that the fixed route will still very much function to serve the needs of the Ridge in terms of getting commuters down the hill as well as commuters up the hill, and then some midday runs so that you can get down the hill for a doctor's appointment or something, and then back within a few hours. So, and then the big thing really is that looking at that service area map of right now, the fixed route, if you think about, you know, a quarter-mile walk is kind of a reasonable expectation of how far to walk to a fixed route. And we might be serving 30% of that area that, you know, the residents are within a reasonable walk distance of the fixed route. And with the microtransit, we can basically serve all of it. Yes, you may need to make a transfer if you're going down the Ridge, but the service will come to your home. It'll serve the whole area. And it's really the only way I think that transit can effectively serve this new development pattern as the area regrows.
So for the future, and again, sorry to take up so much time in Paradise, but I know that all the rest of you probably have questions in your area. So as the town grows, there'll also be more college in here. This also have, which is separate from our seniors who are trying to get a doctor's appointment. So does this also have the capability to work in those cases and to, provide the transportation needed? Yeah.
Gordon.
I'm sorry, the speaker cut out there in the middle, I'm afraid. I didn't hear it all. So,
I was just gonna say, we'll look at these issues. As I said, we haven't really looked at the fixed route system for over fire and COVID, everything's kind of changed, so we've done some travel surveys and sort of. So this, what we're proposing here, subject to your, just trying to provide the best service with the amount of funding we're putting to transit now to better serve those people that ride the system. So these proposals to take away a fixed route, put in microtransit, it's a slight difference. I mean, that person that is trying to get down to a doctor appointment right now is only using the fixed route system. This microtransit allows getting those people to that bus in Paradise then to take it down to. So it's just kind of a change in the service because there's no fixed route running throughout all these areas now. So we just see the microtransit as something. Get people either within those zones to other locations up in Paradise or to get them to the Paradise to get on the bus.
Note, at college, we have recent fares for their students.
Meeting down Chico.
The Chico campus.
Got it, okay. That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Question in relationship to how the speed of transit would work. So if it's similar to an Uber or a Lyft, you're calling and saying, I need a ride at this time, it means that the more callers you had, you're gonna slow down, and it's like a bus you're taking to Sacramento that stops at every single town and lets people off. Your trip is no longer gonna be an hour and a half, now it's gonna be more than 2 hours. So how do they factor in all of the individual stops at more ridership? In terms of getting you to the bus hub at the.
John, if I can take that,
He's getting very quiet, so yeah.
Good question.
the software, it basically takes care of the dispatching thing. It's actually not an issue more with you're on the van and it's stopping, kind of like if you're on an airport or shuttle or something. It's more that if there's too many calls or app requests within a certain period, you will get longer in the queue. So it's not, you get it within a half an hour. Now you're getting it within 45 minutes. Now you're getting it within an hour. And so it really is a balance. We do have discussion in here of the need in the long run for a second van in Paradise area, Magalia area, as the demand goes up. And we've talked with staff about, that if that happens, then that happens. And it may be just a few hours a day that it's busiest where our response times gets too long. I'll relate that we've established microtransit in Truckee, California, and it's been very successful. It's getting hundreds of rides a day. It's a bigger service. It's a bigger service area, and it's surprising. It's not the tourists. It's the locals that are using it. And there have been times where the wait time gets to be 45 minutes or an hour, and then we have to look at putting more service on. So to tell you the truth, it's running fixed route service can be pretty simple. You put the bus out there and it just works like clockwork. This takes more management and now balancing off the demand, but we've done a lot of work at at looking at the demand per capita in different areas and the factors that go into how much demand these other areas generate. I mentioned that like Sacramento RT has got 7 different zones, so we can look at that as but more of a comparable for Paradise area or other kind of rural areas, and try and really identify that we think that we can meet that idea of a half-hour service, like 90% of the time. We'll be able to meet that within a half-hour service as we start off here. But yeah, it's going to take ongoing management of the service like that.
Follow up on that, what's the expectation in terms of fare box recovery? Do we see that the fare box recovery percentage goes up with the microtransit, or does it stay about the same, or what's the anticipated outcome?
I believe it'll stay about the same. We expect to get more riders per hour. I did mention that because it's a local route, and this is kind of like a fare policy thing, we would call it a local service. So it's got the lower fare level than the regional routes, which is a benefit if you live up there. But I think those 2 factors will basically balance themselves out. I will also throw in that we've talked to the contractor and they're very amenable to this idea, and they have implemented microtransit in other areas. So they've got the experience there.
Exciting stuff. Thank you, Gordon. Great presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to the public input on this, and we'll learn more and feed that back into the plan and be pulling this all together. Thank you for your attention.
Have any public comment on this? Information only. I have a quick question. Do we have a 10 o'clock hard stop, or do we just keep? Okay, just making sure. I don't think we.
All the time.
I just need to let them know how long it's. All right, item 10, draft of regional growth plan forecast, and for 45, Brian.
This morning, board, BCAG staff has been working with our planning directors group for the development of our 2024. These are typically updated every 4 years. This one's a little unique. We updated these in 2021 our study, regrowth of the area. This update really takes into account the new Department of Finance forecast, so inflation estimates, all the long-term projections, which incorporates new annexations as well as tax from the as with past forecasts that we've developed, we low, medium, and high scenario. For our RTP will be using medium scenario. These environments, low and high are available for use. With that,
Okay. 11, regional travel survey update. Chris.
Thank you. We've been working with our consultant team at PlaceWorks to develop a regional travel survey report for Good County. And we're joined today by Andrea Howard and Allison Gibb, PlaceWorks consultant team, and they're going to go over a few slides here in a minute. But first, just wanted to give you some background on the report. You may recall at the February board meeting, we had an info item just letting you know that the development of this report was underway. So now we've got a draft version of the plan. We've included it as an attachment to this item. And, you know, the purpose of the study is to kind of better understand the current travel conditions in the region following the fires that have occurred and COVID, kind of similar to the routing study. This sort of builds on what the routing study is doing. Yeah, it enhances it a little bit. So, anyway, the purpose of the survey also is to inform the 2024 update of the regional transportation plan, Sustainable Community Strategy update, which is getting underway. We wanted to develop some good data, the onset of that to the development of strategies and actions and policies in the SCS that can help us meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets in that plan, in the SCS that are required by the state. So the draft report pulls together data from several different sources. We've incorporated demographic data from the Department of Finance and the U.S. Census Bureau, and then we've also pulled some public transit data in from our staff here at BCAG staff, and then we've also acquired some anonymized cellular travel data from Streetlight Data Vendor for the analysis of more like large-scale travel patterns within the region. So we supplemented that information with two different surveys that we conducted. First being a community survey, which targeted residents and employees of the region to learn preferences and barriers and also opportunities related to mobility. And then the second survey was a regional employer survey to identify opportunities to promote alternate modes of travel to access them. So two different surveys, and we had a variety of promotional techniques to get those surveys out to the public. The community survey was promoted through our social media outlets, with advertisements on all the line bus fleets, numerous email distribution lists, both ones that BCAG has and coordinated with member jurisdiction planning staff who also share the surveys with their lists as well. That community survey was available in 3 different languages, English and Hmong. And then the employer survey was promoted mainly through the local chambers of commerce. We reached out to each chamber of commerce throughout, asked them to share it with their membership. They got that well. And then we also targeted the large employers in the region to make sure we got some responses from bigger employers in the region. So, yeah, the development of the report, as I kind of mentioned, was coordinated with member jurisdiction planning staff through the planning directors group. They helped us distribute the surveys and also provided input as we went through. They're currently reviewing the draft report as well. So we expect the final report will be developed next month. It's going to be available on the BCAG website. It'll be shared with staff, with Caltrans, and we think that this information will be helpful not just for like the RTP SCS update, but other planning underway in the region. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Howard from the PlaceWorks team, and she's going to go over kind of some of the key findings in the report.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. As Chris said, my name is Andrea Howard. I am with the firm PlaceWorks, and we are leading your Sustainable Community Strategy update as part of the 2024 RTP SCS. I am joined by my colleague, Allison Giffen. I am the project manager for the SCS effort, and Allison is our technical lead. So I will go over a brief presentation with you all to highlight some of the key findings from our report and talk about some of the what goes into, in particular, that cell-based streetlight data analysis. And Allison is the expert here in case you send me any tough questions. So you should all be able to see my screen now, and I'll just go ahead and get started here. So the purpose of this report overall, as Chris said, we're really looking to understand the current conditions in the region when it comes to travel. We've had a couple of major events here that have really altered the patterns that you're seeing in the region, in particular the Camp Fire, the North Complex Fire, and COVID. So we looked at 3 different areas: demographic and economic patterns, conducted the surveys Chris discussed, and then we looked at travel characteristics. And ultimately, again, as Chris said, this is really meant to inform your RTP SCS and other regional planning efforts and decision making. And I think you'll find a lot of overlap with the presentation in, I believe, item 9 with the bus routing study, that this really complements a lot of the findings there. So helps to reinforce some of your decision making and give a kind of different perspective on those items. So essentially the contents of the report follow that same format of details, looking at demographic and travel characteristics data collected from the U.S. Census Bureau and the Department of Finance. What we heard from local folks, your community members and employers, particularly larger employers, and then using that cell-based data to look at travel patterns, and finally data from Beeline on ridership details. And to start here, I'm going to just go through some of what is actually meant with this cell-based travel. I believe that BCAG has worked with the platform Streetlight on a couple of other past studies, so this may all sound somewhat familiar to you all. In this case, as always with cell-based data, your information is somewhat protected, so you can be somewhat assured there. They're not tracking individuals and letting you see what's going on from a person's door to their place of work. Instead, we establish zones. So we worked with your BCAG staff members to identify the boundaries we wanted to set for different zones, and we set those at various scales. So we looked at all of Butte County as a whole, groupings of surrounding counties, incorporated jurisdictions as a whole, as well as subsets of some of those incorporated jurisdictions and subsets of the incorporated county. And finally, the smallest level of detail we looked at were points of interest, like the Gold Country Casino, for example. And then we compared the results of travel between these zones, between different periods of time. So starting with the earliest is 2018. I believe we cut that off in the month of October or November prior to the campfire, and then looking at 2019 period, post-campfire, pre-North Complex Fire, pre-COVID, and then the latest available is a 2022 data set. So this is a look at one of the zone sets. I'm going to quickly go through three of them, all three of the zone sets that we discuss in the report. This is the finest level of detail that you'll see for our zone sets. There are breakouts, as I said, for some of your incorporated jurisdictions. The city of Chico, for example, is broken into 4 different zone sets, as well as having chunks for different points of interest within that. So 14 points of interest here in all. We also looked at developed unincorporated communities as specific points. And then the unincorporated county is broken into quadrants. And then you'll see these adjacent county groupings, and those are common. You'll see that across all of these, we have common zones between some of these zone sets. So the aggregated zone set here next is a sort of medium level detail. The city of Chico, you can see now, is just a single zone, smaller or larger look overall at the county. And then this final inter-county set of zones looks at Butte County as a whole, and then travel between these adjacent county groupings. So Shasta and Tehama County here in the Northwest. I'm going to toggle back for a moment. You'll see that that same zone grouping exists here for the previous 2 zone sets. So next, I'm just going to walk through quickly some of the findings in the different sections, and then welcome any questions that you all might have. So first, looking at the demographic and travel analysis that we did. Again, this is at looking at census and Department of Finance information. And this really reinforced probably what many of you know already intuitively. It just confirmed for us that there is an ongoing need in the region for alternative modes of transportation to be accessible for users of all ages, abilities, and languages spoken. You have an increasing number of speakers of languages other than English. Diversity is increasing in the region. You have varying levels of age groupings, in particular the unincorporated county and the town of Paradise tend to skew older. And you have different levels of disabilities as well. So unincorporated county and Paradise, I think, have by share of their population, a larger share of individuals with a disability. And then you see a concentration of the overall numbers are really great in those more populated jurisdictions, unincorporated county and Chico. And then again, not surprisingly, we confirmed here that driving alone is the most common means for folks to commute to work. Unfortunately, COVID seems to have had a big impact on this, where there was previously higher levels of at least carpooling. Now even those levels are down from what they were pre-COVID. Okay, so then looking at the results of the community employer surveys, we learned from individuals that mobility is a challenge for some of them. Being able to get around to the store or school or work. Some of the commonly identified opportunities to improve bus service that community members named were the addition of a phone-based app or application to track bus arrival times and other information related to bus service, increasing the frequency and extending the hours of bus service, and locating stops closer to origin and destination points. And then when in terms of pedestrians and cyclists, opportunities for improvement named were addressing sidewalk and bike lane gaps and repairs, and then improving the safety of biking and walking, particularly through increasing street lighting and slowing vehicle speeds. Of the employers surveyed, few of them offer any incentives to use alternate modes of transportation. Few of them have any kinds of facilities on site, including something as minimal as like a bike rack to support somebody using an alternate mode of transportation to work. However, many of them also named that if they perceived that there was a need or an interest among employees, or if they had an incentive to do so, they would be willing to. So interesting finding there. Then next, looking at the results of those streetlight cell phone-based surveys. Again, confirming information you probably knew, but putting some numbers to it. Between 2018 and 2019, we saw that auto travel declined really sharply, and then moderately between 2019 and 2020. So this table breaks down what that looks like for different times of day. Typically, you see that the AM period, we call it AM peak here, is named appropriately, that it is the peak time for travel to occur in an area. But I'm going to highlight on this next slide here that that's actually not the case here in Butte County. So in 2018, if you see, for example, in the top line of numbers, I don't know if you're able to see my mouse here, but that's 244,000 number for 2018 for the AM peak, compared to the weekday midday is 342,000. So already a difference there that is not common in all regions. That was a little bit of a surprise to us. So you have a different pattern here than what folks see more typically, and that continues into 2019 and 2020 when you see the travel patterns or the travel drop off. Additionally, we found that most trips are local to the zones, including at that finest level of zone, the disaggregated zone sets where you have, say, for example, the city of Chico broken into 4 quadrants. Most often we were seeing trips starting and ending in the same zone or an adjacent zone. We also found that in the Northwest Chico quadrant, that is one of the top trip generators, origin destination points in the region. And really just because that area is a little bit larger than some of the other quadrants, the way that we broke out the city of Chico, and because that area happens to have a really high concentration of trip generating uses. So either retail facilities, medical facilities, and homes there. A number of these trips we found were coming from longer distances. So this smaller zone tends to attract the most long distance trips, particularly from Glenn and Colusa County. And then for the local trips, there's a large volume from Northeast and Northwest Butte County to that Northwest Chico zone. And then finally here on this slide, I highlight that we have a couple of points of interest that were high trip generators, the Chico Walmart, Chico Costco, and Gold Country Casino. These are all top destinations. So I was happy to hear in Mr. Shaw's presentation that the Gold Country Casino will be one of the targeted sites for mobility. So that will hopefully help to trim those kinds of trips. The streetlight data also tracks bike travel. So we're able to look at that. It does not go back quite as far as the auto travel. So we are only able to look at the years 2019 and 2022 for comparison. But there were some really interesting findings here, namely that bike travel declined by about 50% between 2019 and 2022. So post campfire and post COVID onset, you have a big decline in bike travel, unfortunately. And many of the trips, most of the trips that occur by bike are happening in the city of Chico and then followed by the city of Oroville. Chico accounts for approximately 3/4 of all bike trips, and Oroville is about 10%. And lastly, again, some correlation with the previous presentation, big declines in ridership for transit between 2019 and 2020. And we found that the Route 20 from Chico to Oroville has the highest ridership levels. So for next steps, we are looking to take all of this information, get any input from you all. This report is also with your local planning directors. So get input from local jurisdictions and make any refinements before finalizing the report. And then we'll be taking this, as we said, to inform the sustainable community strategy and other regional plans in the area. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just have a question about the areas and how they're defined. When you say Northwest Chico is the highest access area, what's the dividing line? Are you using Highway 99? Are you using Esplanade? What's the west divider?
That's a great question. I'm going to go back to that slide, and I know that this is a little bit fine. And also invite Allison if you are equipped with that division, but I know you can't see this on the slide too well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So we're using Highway 99 as the eastern boundary of that zone, and then essentially these are aggregated traffic analysis zones, so they don't conform exactly to city limit boundaries, but they are the closest sort of aggregated traffic analysis zones that follow city limit boundaries. So that defines the western border. And then the southern border for the Northwest Chico zone, we are excluding the University of Chico because that's a point of interest. So we sort of extracted that out of the Northwest Chico zone. So it's defined by that border with the California State University Chico campus. And I believe it's, Vallombrosa Avenue that, that delineates Bidwell Park from the northern area. That's just to, the east of campus. So, essentially, to the west, the border is Chico city limits, but it's not exact because this zone is aggregated traffic analysis zones. To the east, we've got Highway 99, and then to the south, we've got the University or California State University, Chico, and then Vallombrosa Avenue on the south.
In your study, are you able to pull out any particular choke points or congestion points in the travel patterns? Orville, we have a couple bridges, and that obviously is a choke point, but curious about congestion points, time of day. Is that whole data from your study?
So we didn't actually look at congestion in terms of vehicle delay at intersections. We're mostly concerned with regional travel patterns and overall volumes. So these analyses do not capture congestion in terms of what a single vehicle will experience in terms of traffic delay in minutes. So the short answer is we didn't look at choke points.
It really looks at zone to zone movement, so what percentage of people are going from Chico to east side of Orville to west side? So travel demand model, which will be taking this data and putting that into, we'll look at individual.
Appreciate that. That's one of the things we're all looking at right now, I'm sure.
I would just add too that we could then take this data and develop better strategies for trying to get people out of cars by understanding where people are going. Target those areas with public transit, with share and things, strategies like that, or to try to meet these state required targets for reducing greenhouse.
All right.
Price of that, but sure.
Oh, yeah. All right, any other questions? Any public comments? All right, thank you so much. Great presentation, and thank you for all the information.
Thank you.
Item 12, Federal Transportation Improvement Plan, amended number 2.
Yes, good morning, Board. Real quickly, BCAG is required to amend the 2023 FTIP for various local projects. This is an information item that'll come back to you for approval at the board, at the May board meeting. The purpose of the FTIP is to identify all transportation projects that have federal transportation funds or require some type of federal approval from the Federal Highway Administration or Federal Transit Administration. This amendment number 2 changes various funding programs, including the active transportation program, in which we will be programming 4 new projects for the town of Paradise and for Butte County Public Works for a combined total of $48 million in new active transportation projects. And those are listed in your memo there. Changes to the congestion mitigation and air quality program are proposed for 2 local projects. Well, actually 3. The first one is to shift $3.5 million in programming capacity from the City of Chico's Hagen Lane Corridor project and program that funding capacity to the city's Bikeway 99 project, in addition to $1.5 million in local funds. The Hagen Lane project is a little behind schedule, so the city is regrouping. So we're going to trying to take advantage of that programming capacity and alleviate a funding shortfall for the Bikeway 99 project. The city a few months ago went out to bid and they were $5 million short. It's currently being repackaged, so hopefully the city gets better competitive bids. But if it's in the $5 million neighborhood, we want to provide the resources and make good on on the active transportation program funded, in addition to CMAQ funded projects. The second CMAQ funded project, which is also an active transportation program project, is for the town of Paradise, and that's the ATP gap closure project that was originally programmed back in 2017. Since 2017, the Paradise Campfire and the change in bidding climate and cost of materials for construction, they have a $1 million shortfall, and they are obligated to make good on that project. BCAG is proposing to program $1 million in additional CMAQ funds for that project. The shift in funding, including the additional $1 million for the town of Paradise, will not affect any existing CMAQ funded projects. The city, again, will come back with their Hagen Lane when they're ready, and hopefully the town of Paradise will make good on the 2017 funded project. The other changes included in this amendment are smaller in nature, updates to the Highway Bridge Program for various local projects, primarily for Butte County Public Works in the city of Chico, some smaller Highway Safety Improvement Program projects, primarily for Butte County. This amendment does program a new project on behalf of the town of Paradise for $1.8 million for the Rowe Road Extension Project for funding secured by Congressman LaMalfa. This is a capacity changing project, so there's more involved in approving that through this process. In addition, this amendment programs 4 new paratransit vehicles for $288,000 for the FTA Section 5310 program. This was presented to BCAG's Transportation Advisory Committee on April 6th. They support this amendment that will be presented in May. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Question, the 48 million going into Paradise, was there an application process or how?
There was a very competitive process. The active transportation program is managed by the California Transportation Commission, and there was actually statewide, there was an infusion of $1 billion for that. Yeah, the town of Paradise made out great with approximately 40 million, and so did the county for South Oroville. Do some gap closures there or near the schools. There will be a cycle 7, but it's very, very competitive.
Out on that one, apparently.
My understanding is city staff was pretty busy with existing project delivery. Thank you.
Now, do we have anything from the board? I guess now we'll adjourn to Thursday, May 25th at 9 o'clock.
Hold on, yeah.